Spirituality encompasses our sense of being connected to others, our awareness of both mind and body, and our wishes to understand life's meaning in this world and beyond. Art has long played an important role within our relationship to spiritual or sacred beings or feelings. And art can help us to envision, understand, honor, and communicate with the sacred. Your chapter kind of divides this discussion into about 6 broad categories of artworks. These include depictions of gods, deities, or other central figures, references to spirits of the natural world or to ancestors, suggestions of communication with the spirit world, reactions to places that are believed to have sacred resonance or places that are built for worship, depictions of judgment at the end of earthly life, and personal paths to spirituality. I've included a couple of other things that art and architecture associated with spirituality may accomplish, but for the sake of time, we're going to leave it at that. Artists communicate stories of specific religious figures or deities to help explain their importance and make them more memorable and accessible. For example, in this large stela, or upright stone slab with relief carvings, we see the depiction of the life of the Buddha, or the Awakened One, a Hindu prince named Siddhartha Gautama, who lived in southern Nepal or northern India in about 563 to 483 BCE. This particular stone, this sculpture, dates to about 475 CE. So Siddhartha Gautama, he was a Hindu prince who gave up his status and wealth to focus on how to achieve spiritual perfection and to put an end to worldly suffering by breaking the endless cycle of reincarnation. He achieved enlightenment, or reached nirvana, which is sort of this release from worldly desires that ends the cycle of death and reincarnation and begins this permanent state of bliss. Siddhartha Gautama became the first Buddha, or the first awakened one, and his ideas are the core of Buddhism, and Buddhist art tends to focus on the story of his life and teachings. So again, this stela shows the life of the Buddha, and in the bottom section we see his miraculous birth as he emerges from his mother's right side. Upon his birth, it was prophesied that he was destined for greatness, and his father, the king, really wanted to shield him from suffering and danger, so he raised him in the palace in seclusion. At the age of 29, the prince was restless, and he asked to leave the palace and take a tour of the capital. During this tour, he experienced illness and saw aging and death for the first time, and he vowed to find a way to end such suffering, or to put a stop to this endless cycle of death and reincarnation. So above that bottom scene, above that birth scene, we have the moment that Buddha achieves enlightenment, or the release from worldly desires that ends the cycle of reincarnation and begins that state of permanent bliss, or nirvana. So the Buddha is shown sort of meditating under a tree, touching the earth in a symbolic gesture of strength and renewal. In the next section up, we see the prince giving his first sermon as the Buddha, preaching self-denial and meditation. Again, he's in a meditative pose with legs crossed, this time hands posed in prayer. Then at the very top, he is shown reclining as he achieves nirvana, or eternal tranquility. And to the sides, there are smaller carvings that show noteworthy moments from his life after leaving princehood to become a holy man. So Siddhartha Gautama was the first person to achieve enlightenment and become a Buddha. However, as the religion spread throughout South and Southeast Asia and on into China and Japan, it evolved to believe that anyone may become an awakened one by following Siddhartha's teachings. So today there are many different Buddhas. The imagery and symbolism of Buddhist art, however, were established pretty early within the development of the religion, so there are certain indicators that identify a figure as a Buddha, whether it is intended to be Siddhartha Gautama or another one. There are in total about 32 distinguishing marks, so let's look at a few here. In general, the figure of Buddha tends to have a certain focus on elegance and inner peace, and also otherworldly introspection. They are typically shown wearing monk's robes that sort of drape over the shoulder here, sometimes over just one shoulder like this one. Generally, he has a pretty slim, kind of powerful body, although there are also very plump kind of Buddhas as well. Often the Buddha is shown in this kind of cross-legged yogic position, shown in meditation or in prayer, although sometimes he is standing or laying as well. Generally, there are kind of elongated arms, very sort of soft curves. Elongated earlobes are common, as Prince Siddhartha Gautama would have worn very heavy earrings to sort of stretch his earlobes. The Buddha is typically shown with this top knot, which is called an Ushnishna. It symbolizes enlightenment. And then there's also usually a circular mark between the eyebrows, which is called an Urna, which symbolizes the third eye and the Buddha's ability to see into the divine. There are also a whole repertoire of mudras, or hand gestures with symbolic meanings that relate to different stories from Buddha's life, or different aspects of the role the Buddha plays in guiding others on their own paths to enlightenment. In the previous life of Buddha Stela, he's touching the earth in a symbolic gesture of strength and renewal. That would be a mudra. On the left here in this 4th century sculpture, both hands are sort of held at chest level, with the thumbs of each hand touching the respective index fingers to create a circular shape or wheel of law, which refers to particular spiritual states as well as values that the Buddha taught. And it recalls the Buddha's first sermon as well. This particular Buddha in the center, the Amida Buddha, this one is from Japan. Buddhism appeared in Japan in the 6th century, and by the 10th century had evolved into a couple of different sort of versions, one of which is Pure Land Buddhism. Pure Land worship centered on the Amida Buddha, also known as the Buddha of the Western Paradise, the Buddha of Immeasurable Light, and the Buddha of Limitless Life. Amida presided over a heavenly paradise and promised salvation and rebirth in this paradise for all worshippers. This particular figure's soft, round face is characteristic of Japanese Buddha sculptures from the 12th century. The elegant facial features have been stylized, as have the hands and the drapery folds. Here he's displaying a teaching mudra, with the right hand held at chest level, palm turned outwards, fingers upwards, with the thumb touching the index finger in a circle again. And then the left hand makes the same gesture with while laying on the lap with the palm upturned. And then when we talked about sculpture, we talked about this particular Avucana Buddha just briefly. And I mentioned that it displays a mudra called the Asisa mudra, which includes this hand kind of upright with the palm facing out, which symbolizes fearlessness and reassurance. So even though all three of these are different, they all include these sort of symbolic gestures or these different aspects like the top knot or the mark between the eyes that help us to identify this figure as Buddha, regardless of how much we know about the specifics of the religion or the background of Buddhist art. Somewhat similarly, important themes and events from the Bible have inspired many artists to illustrate Hebrew and Christian stories. Particularly in medieval and Renaissance Europe, Christian subjects and themes were some of the most prominent within the art world, often making scripture more accessible to the general public. For example, in the 11th century, Bishop Bernward at the Abbey Church of St. Michael in Hildesheim, Germany, commissioned a set of monumental ornamental bronze doors that depict scenes from the book of Genesis on the left and from the life of Christ on the right. Each door is a single piece of cast bronze, including the lion heads with ringed pulls here. These were created using molds, and then the scenes were sort of detailed and refined using chisels and other tools. Each scene is very sort of visually stimulating, conveying the spontaneity of the elongated, softly rounded, very sort of lively figures that are set within these spacious but kind of stylized backgrounds. There's no extreme naturalism or realism here. It's sort of meant to reflect the Christian emphasis on internal spiritual matters and themes rather than focusing on the exterior physical world. The scenes in the door are meant to be read sort of counterclockwise in chronological order, beginning at the top left, kind of moving down, and then you kind of work your way back up the right side here. They're arranged so that the panels, or rather Old Testament panels, are kind of paired with New Testament scenes that are meant to kind of complement one another. So, for example, the third panel from the top on the left depicts the moment that Adam and Eve take the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge and commit the original sin, and are then, as a result, expelled from the garden into the world of suffering and death. This scene is paired with a scene on the right of the crucifixion. The cross on which Jesus is crucified here is meant to be understood as the tree of life, kind of a counterpart to the tree of knowledge on the left. The tree of life here offers eternal life to believers who ask forgiveness of sins and accept Christ as their Savior. So this scene with the cross serving as the tree of life offers the salvation and forgiveness needed because of the events that happen in this scene with Adam and Eve at the tree of knowledge. In many cultures, including Native American and African cultures, artworks often reflect the spiritual importance of gods and ancestors. In some belief systems, objects can be infused with a spiritual presence, and through ritual, these objects help to continue and preserve cultural practices, ideas, and family ties, to establish or restore balance, and to enhance or even transform mundane life. For example, for the Hopi of the southwestern United States, rituals highlight the cycles of nature that are central to their daily activities. Kachinas, or supernatural spirits, personify events and such natural elements as the solstices, patterns of the stars, plants, and animals. During the planting season, masked dancers assume the likeness of the Kachina in annual festivals dedicated to rain, fertility, and good hunting. Along with the masqueraders, dolls or small sculptures give a physical form to these spirits. The Kachina doll that is shown in the center here is what represents the Jemez Kachina. The one on the left represents the Jemez Kachina as well. It's just from slightly later in time. But the Jemez Kachina appears near the end of the season when the spirits are about to leave the community for about 6 months. The elaborate headdress on the Jemez Kachina contains cloud symbols, denoting its effectiveness in bringing rain. The doll carries a rattle in one hand in the central figure, but looks like maybe a rattle in both hands on this left-hand figure here. But the central figure also carries a sprig of Douglas fir, which is actually represented by a feather here. As the first Kachina to bring mature corn to the Hopi, the Jemez Kachina is believed to ensure specifically a successful corn crop. Ancient rituals passed from generation to generation often reflect ideas that are central to that community's belief system. For example, the sand painting ritual of the Navajo of New Mexico produces temporary works of art that are constructed as part of a prayer ceremony. The paintings are closely connected to nature, both in terms of the materials used, such as corn, pollen, charcoal, sand, and powdered stones, as well as in imagery. The subject matter, taken from Navajo creation mythology, includes logs, holy plants, animals, and deities. After an image has been meticulously created over the course of several days or even weeks, a healing ceremony takes place, which is overseen by a priest with the ability to communicate directly with the spirit world, or a medicine man, or even more rarely, sometimes a medicine woman. In the ritual, the paintings are believed to transform into vehicles of power, restoring harmony to the tribe or individual. When the person to be healed sits in the center, they absorb power from Navajo ancestors and from the gods depicted in the painting. The careful production of sand paintings and the choice of an impermanent medium are believed to channel forces of nature and ancestry to benefit the community in the physical realm by promoting food, health, harmony, and well-being. Navajo healer, artist, and ceremonial singer Hosteen Claw started making weavings in about 1919 that showed the kinds of designs made in these sand painting ceremonies. Claw was greatly respected, but many Navajo people attacked him for making outsiders aware of such private ceremonies. One particular tapestry is called the Whirling Log Ceremony. It was woven by someone else, but based on a design by Claw. It shows part of the Navajo creation myth in which a human, Seal Oni, partakes in a symbolic journey through life. Over time, he comes to the Colorado River, where he will be pulled ashore by the gods, shown one on each side of this tapestry, holding a staff. Guides, which are male and female pairs kind of placed in each quadrant of the tapestry, standing on the edges of the crossed logs, will teach the human being everything he needs before he returns home. All the while, Seal Oni is protected by the guardian god Rainbow Maiden, shown as a stretch figure that surrounds the entire scene. The Rainbow Maiden, however, does not border the eastern horizon at the top of the tapestry in order to allow the sunrise on the next day and to sort of symbolically create a new beginning after the transformation of Seal Oni. Creator deities, nature spirits, and ancestors feature prominently in the religion of the Sinofo people of West Africa. They believe in a supreme being who created the world, a dual female-male deity. Divination, governed by the Sandogo Society, is also important to their religious practices. Masqueraders serve as intermediaries between the spiritual and human worlds during ritual performances. The masquerades feature exquisitely carved wooden masks, full-body garments. In this particular case, the garments are made of raffia in this image. And there's also dynamic music, dances, and protocols specific to the society and the occasion. Some Sinofo masks honor deceased elders, while others, like the helmet masks in this image, are connected with fraternal organizations in the region, such as the Poro Society. Masks designs reference powerful animals and scarification patterns in the belief that these will offer fierce protection against malevolent forces. Several Congo-speaking groups in Central Africa, including the Yambe people, are known for their strong sculptural traditions, and they tend to create these power figures called Nkisi, or in the plural sense, Minkisi, that serve as reminders of social obligations and enforcers of proper behavior. These objects are primarily containers of sacred medicine. In fact, Nkisi means sacred medicine. They can take the form of shells, bags, pots, or more popularly, wooden sort of figurative statues. These objects are spiritually charged, and they are created, of course, by an artist or a carver. However, the artist must work with a spiritual advisor or an nganga to fuse the spiritual with the physical and visual attributes of the sculpture. So, in consultation with this priest, the nganga, the sculptor kind of begins with a subtractive process, carving a wooden representation until it takes on the approved figural qualities. Then the artist will work in an additive method, adding pieces of clothing, paint, and ornament, making sure to leave a void or a cavity somewhere on the figure where a spirit may reside. The nganga will place sacred medicine or materials within that void. These things can include plants, dirt, various types of clay. It can also include things like relics or other medicinal ingredients. But the nganga places these items or these medicines within and seals them in, sometimes using an object like a mirror, sometimes using a cowrie shell or other objects. And that is kind of what activates the object. So without the sacred medicine being added to it, this is just a figurative kind of sculpture. It's that medicine that brings the power of the spirits into the figure. And so these Nkisi, they can, kind of promote or help with a variety of things. They can be used to heal illnesses, settle disputes, maybe safeguard peace, or even punish wrongdoers. The one on the left here is from the University of Iowa collection. It features a crown of feathers, as well as metal anklets and collars, leopard teeth, and cowrie shells. This particular sculpture, the sacred medicines are placed inside the abdomen here, and then it's been sealed with a mirror. Mirrors are symbolic of contact with the supernatural or the spiritual realm in these particular cultures. And again, the materials are placed inside there, and they are what bring the spiritual power to the figure. This one on the right is slightly larger. It's almost 2 feet tall, and it is owned by the Metropolitan Museum. It's kind of interesting because it has lots of accumulated materials here, including amulets and bundles of sacred medicine and 2 miniature Nkisi figures of its own. So it is an Nkisi, and then it has additional ones tied to it to sort of increase its power. You can also sort of tell the figure itself has kind of a rough quality to it. Those are also the remnants of other kind of spiritual medicines that have been rubbed on the surface or poured over the surface to, again, kind of increase its power or activate the figure and bring the spirit to it. Particular type of Nkisi called an Nkisi Nkandi, or the plural is Minkisi Minkandi, is a standing figure with its feet sort of spread apart in a powerful, assertive pose. Nkandi means hunter, as in to hunt down and call to account those who have done wrong in society. Oftentimes, white kaolin clay, shells, and other reflective objects on such figures symbolize contact with the spiritual, again, just like the mirror that was used to seal the abdominal cavity with sacred medicine in the previous slide. Ritual specialists believe to have the power to release the object's spiritual presence. Again, the nganga, they are the ones who would activate the Minkisi. Each figure serves a specific function, but in general, these Nkisi Nkondi were responsible for making sure that oaths sworn in its presence would be honored. And each time the figure was needed, the Nganga, or the priest, would drive nails, blades, and other metal objects into its wooden surface to make the spirit quote-unquote angry and rouse it into action. As a mediator between the ancestral spirit world and the living world of human beings, the Nkisi Nkonde was believed to bring protection and healing to the community. The one shown on, on the right here, this one has been activated many times, and we can tell because of the numerous iron blades that have been sort of hammered into its surface. The giant cowrie shell in the abdomen is a symbol of fertility and wealth for the Yambe people, as well as for other cultures within this region. And such shells have also been widely used as currency in this part of Africa. This particular Nkisi Nkondi has wide, staring eyes and a sort of imposing stance to help ensure that no other forces will interfere with the fulfillment of its ritual function. Minkisi figures may be used by individuals, families, or entire communities. Public Nkisi tend to be much larger in scale, and they often have pretty vital democratizing roles within a community. For example, this would be an example of a public Minkisi figure. So say an agreement was struck between two or more people within a community. Those people would have come to the public figure like this one, and they would have sealed that agreement by driving nails or other pieces of metal into the wooden surface, sort of simulating signing a contract. The perceived supernatural power of the figure could be then called on if one of the people broke their end of the agreement here. There are also Nkisi Kozo, which are sort of canine figures that are meant to work alongside the Nkisi Nkondi to hunt down and punish anyone who breaks agreements, laws, or commits evil. These particular canine or dog-like figures, these are interesting. They have two heads, one for the living realm and one for the spirit realm. And in this particular example, if you notice, the mouths are sort of open, and so ritual libations or offerings were likely poured into the mouths, again, to sort of activate the spirit. Communication with the gods, spirits, and ancestors has also been an important subject for art in many cultures. Sometimes artworks show direct interactions between individuals and divine beings, while other times an individual seen as having special qualities may serve as an intermediary between humans and the divine, and sort of use art objects to help them communicate. For example, in much Christian art, saints and mythological figures interact with God to provide role models or to help educate viewers about religious practices. During the Middle Ages, Christians in the Eastern Orthodox Church, which separated from the Roman Catholic Church in the year 1054, used icons such as this image, which is titled The Virgin of Vladimir. They used these icons as a focus of devotion and a source of inspiration. Many of these were painted on wooden panels so that they could be carried around, but sometimes the icons would be attached to chapel screens in churches. Portable icons could be transported from Constantinople in the Byzantine Empire to distant places such as Russia in order to help spread and support Christian beliefs. The icons themselves were not worshipped as divine, however, they were believed to have miraculous powers. They became the subjects of intense reverence because they depicted individuals whose saintliness meant that they were close to God and therefore able to spread goodness. The Orthodox Church required the form and content of icons to follow traditional rules. As a result, although each painting is unique, it has a family resemblance to other icons. Gold backgrounds, linear outlines, and stylized but believable poses are all common. It was important that the figures in these icons could be recognized by anyone who saw them. Thus, the Madonna and Child were always shown with halos to represent their holiness. The Virgin of Vladimir portrays Mary with her face touching Jesus to emphasize her virtue as the Virgin of loving kindness. This icon, probably made in the city of Constantinople, was intended to bless and protect the city in which it was housed. Only the faces are original. The rest of the panel here was probably damaged by people touching it during devotion or prayer and has been repainted. The Ecstasy of St. Teresa by Gian Lorenzo Bernini is another Christian artwork that is meant to inspire devotion and reverence. It was made between 1647 and 1652 to decorate a funerary chapel for the Cornaro family in the Church of Santa Maria della Vittoria in Rome. This is a massive sculpture, more than about 11 feet tall, that depicts one of St. Teresa of Avila's mystical visions. So here she is about to be pierced by an angel's arrow that will infuse her with divine love. The sort of theatrical staging and the emphasis on dramatic light created by the use of gilt bronze rays behind the figures and by the light falling from a hidden window above the sculpture are typical of the Baroque style that was popular around this time. Bernini's sculpture is executed with great attention to detail. The whole scene seems to take place in the clouds, and the angel almost hovers above St. Teresa. The marble is carved to suggest several different textures, including smooth skin, gauzy fabric, clinging draperies, and the heavy wool of the nun's habit worn by the saint. The combination of accurate and believable details with an exaggerated picture of devotion reflects the Catholic Church's new emphasis at the time on believers establishing a strong personal relationship with Christ. In Bernini's sculpture, Christ's passion is relived in the intensity of St. Teresa's piety, which serves as an example for the devout. As we live our lives, our choices determine the impact we will have and how we will be perceived. And in many belief systems, the moral implications of our decisions have lasting consequences. As a result, the act of judging a life before the deceased is allowed to pass into the afterlife has been the theme of numerous artworks. For example, in ancient Egypt, the deceased were buried with a set of belongings that reflected their position in life. One of the most important of these possessions was a Book of the Dead, a scroll with spells and incantations designed to help the deceased navigate the passage into the afterlife. As we can see in this Book of the Dead that belonged to a scribe named Hunefer, who lived more than 3,000 years ago, a successful journey required proof that one had lived an honorable life and that proper respect had been paid to the gods. At the top of this scroll, Hunefer pleads his case to the 42 judges of the dead, represented here with just 14 mummified deities, probably because the artists didn't really have room to show all of them. In the bottom panel, Hunefer is escorted by Anubis, the jackal-headed god associated with mummification and the afterlife. They walk towards the scales where Hunefer's soul will be weighed. Ammit, or the eater of the dead, with the head of a crocodile, mane and forequarters of a lion, and hindquarters of a hippopotamus, anxiously looks on. Anubis determines that Hunefer's soul, in the form of his heart in a canopic jar, is lighter than the ostrich feather that it is being weighed against, and he is therefore proven to be worthy, and Hunefer is presented to by Horus, which is the falcon-headed god of the sun, sky, and war, to the god Osiris, the god of goodness, vegetation, and death, who is seated on his throne at the far right end. This Book of the Dead was placed in Hunefer's coffin in the hope that its script would be followed and he would successfully gain immortality in the afterlife. Scenes of the Last Judgment are also very prominent in Christian art. However, for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Both of these artworks are discussed in the chapter, though, if you're interested. There are many works of art and architecture that are also created to provide settings for worship, prayer, or rituals, and they can serve to sort of formalize contact between earthly and divine realms. Additionally, there are also many places, both man-made and natural places, that people visit over and over again to restore their souls or to feel connected or at peace, again, to receive inspiration for worship or prayer, or, just to kind of feel a sense of connectedness to nature, religion, or community. For example, there are many places, such as the prehistoric caves of Lascaux, that people have returned to again and again over many centuries. And this indicates, significance, a certain importance. Whether for memorial or religious purposes, these places were also adorned with artworks, sort of giving the sacred nature an added dimension. The walls of the Lascaux caves in southern France, these were painted sometime between about 17,000 and 15,000 BCE. There's one particular section of the cave that is densely packed with paintings of animals. The effort required to paint the walls of these caves with so many images suggests that these animals encountered on a daily basis would have been extremely important to the artists. Some of the most significant and magnificent paintings are found in the Hall of Bulls, which is the main sort of cavern. It's about 66 feet wide and 16 feet high. The Hall of Bulls is near the entrance to the system of caves, and as suggested, it is decorated with outlines and realistic details of numerous bulls, as well as other animals such as horses and things. These are quite large. One of these bulls, this one I believe, is more than 15 feet long, so these are quite massive. The images in this area tend to overlap, indicating that the site was visited repeatedly over many centuries, and that making these paintings in this particular place was significant. Because the makers of the paintings at Lascaux had no system of writing, we must interpret the stories of these images from the pictures themselves. In addition to telling stories, prehistoric cave paintings may also have been used to teach hunting and to represent spiritual or ritual practices. Paintings similar to those that are found at Lascaux have also been found in other places in France and in Spain, as well as in other continents, including Africa and South America. This sort of indicates that paintings like this were part of maybe wider cultural practices for people who either moved from place to place across a continent or who shared ideas with others. I've also included this image here kind of at the bottom to sort of show you the map of the cave system, so you can see the Hall of Bulls kind of near the front, which is this image. But then as you kind of get deeper into the cave system, you can turn down several different corridors, and at one point there is a sort of vertical section that drops about 16 feet straight down, and inside that 16-foot drop, researchers have discovered this particular image. Seems to be a sort of bird-headed figure, and then this bison, which maybe has been speared, but has, in its kind of death throes, trampled the hunter as well. Again, we don't know exactly what this image is trying to communicate or what significance it might have had. However, the placement alone, the fact that the artist, traveled all the way back in and down into one of the deepest parts of this cave to create this image, implies that it had some significance to that artist and to that people. Here we're looking at the Kaaba. This is a cube-shaped, textile-covered shrine that is associated with Muslim or Islamic beliefs. It was believed to have been built originally in about the 7th century, around the time that the Prophet Muhammad received his visions from Allah and began founding the Islamic religion. Now, at that time, the Kaaba was a shrine that housed many different pagan idols, but Muhammad eventually rededicated it in the name of Allah. And today, the Kaaba is considered one of the most sacred sites in the Islamic world, and it is the direction in which all Muslims pray. So one of the 5 pillars of Islam, or one of the defining practices that is sort of central to the religion, is prayer. Muslims pray 5 times daily, during which they orient themselves toward the city of Mecca, and that is where the Kaaba is located. Another pillar of Islam is pilgrimage. So for those who are able, they are expected to travel to Mecca, and specifically the Kaaba, at least once in their lifetime. The other pillars of Islamic faith are profession of faith, claiming that there is no God but Allah and that Muhammad was his messenger, as well as charity, and then fasting. So the Kaaba is housed in the Masjid al-Haram, or the Sacred or Grand Mosque in the city of Mecca. This is the largest mosque in the world. It covers about 88.2 acres of both indoor and outdoor spaces, and it is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the mosque is the sacred place of worship for Muslims to gather and pray to Allah. Because mosques are often the largest structures in a city, they have also played a significant role in community activities, especially when used as trading centers, schools, or hospitals. The architecture of mosques is somewhat standardized, meaning there are certain features or elements that are included in most or all mosques. For example, we have 3 aerial views of 3 different mosques here, and as you can see, all 3 are sort of similar in shape. Mosques tend to have an open courtyard like this, and then they also tend to have this long rectangular hypostyle hall, which, if you recall, when we were discussing architecture, we did look at the hypostyle hall of the Great Mosque in Jenne. But essentially, the hypostyle hall is used as the prayer hall. It's a very vast kind of horizontal interior space filled with a forest of columns. Most mosques also have minarets, which are tall towers from which the faithful were sort of called to prayer. Earlier ones, such as this one at the Great Mosque of Kairouan in Tunisia, were relatively short and squat, kind of wider and more square, while more contemporary ones have become more slender, taller, and they are more decorative as well. So here is an interior view of the hypostyle prayer hall at the Great Mosque of Cordoba, just to provide an example. Here we have these lovely kind of double horseshoe arches that are repeated throughout the space, so we have this nice sense of rhythm, and then also a sense of rhythm kind of being created in the alternation of the red and white stone blocks that are used to create the arches as well. And then here on the right, this is the mihrab inside the Great Mosque of Cordoba. So all mosques include a mihrab, which is a sort of special prayer niche located in the wall of the mosque that is oriented toward Mecca. So again, Muslims orient themselves towards Mecca and the Kaaba during prayer. And so inside each mosque, one wall is oriented toward Mecca. That is the Qibla wall. And on the Qibla wall will be this empty kind of niche marking the Qibla wall and therefore the direction of Mecca. That niche is the mihrab. Usually the mihrab is the most decorated area of the prayer hall. As you can see here, very sort of elaborate decoration around this empty niche itself. And then in this case, we have a very sort of elaborate dome with these windows up high in the wall that kind of flood the space with this nice natural light. This particular mihrab is from the Madrasa Imami in Isfahan, Iran, and it's a wonderful example of the decorative attention that is given to this space with such importance. We've got geometric lines, abstract floral designs, and calligraphy being used to create, using small glazed tiles. And so the words of God are sort of emphasized in the decoration of this particular mihrab. Inside that central rectangle, proclaimed in elegant cursive, are the words, "The mosque is the house of every pious person." Script bordering the edges of the mihrab's rectangular frame quotes from the Quran and describes both the importance of a mosque and the duties of a believer. Additionally, there is Kufic script, which is a particular type of Islamic or Arabic calligraphy. It sort of borders the pointed arch of the niche, and it's referring to the 5 central elements or pillars of the Islamic faith, which are, again, devotion to Allah, prayer, charity, fasting, and pilgrimage to Mecca. Generally, inside of a mosque, there will also be a sort of stepped platform or pulpit just to the right of the mihrab. This is called the minbar, and it is essentially a platform for the priest or the imam to stand upon while they are delivering their sermon, to ensure that all worshipers in the congregation can see and hear them. Sometimes the minbar is quite large and elaborately decorated, like this particular one. Other times it's quite small and simple. And in general, this particular mosque is relatively simple. Both the mihrab and the minbar are very sort of subtle. Very little decoration around the mihrab, just a little clock above it to help the worshipers kind of keep track of time during prayer. And then I also appreciate how this particular space, it looks like maybe it was converted from another use into a mosque. And we don't have the traditional forest of columns that a hypostyle hall requires. So there's no columns to divide the floor space and organize the worshipers. So instead we have this kind of patterned carpet to help worshipers find a place to sort of stand and to kneel while they pray. So the Shinto religion in Japan focuses on the here and now and reveres nature itself as a deity. Shinto recognizes, for example, a mountain as a sacred object because it is the source of water for rice cultivation. Such a mountain was once worshipped directly, but over time, shrines were built as places to worship a god known as a kami that was important to a particular area or community. Marking a site as sacred is a common practice in Shinto, which emphasizes the ways in which such natural elements as the sun, mountains, water, and trees are connected to well-being. These sites, such as the Grand Shrine of Ise or Ise Jingu, started with small piles of stones in an area surrounded by stone enclosures and have gradually evolved to include buildings, fences, and gates. Ise Jingu is one of thousands of shrines throughout Japan dedicated to the sun goddess Amatsurio Omikami. Local residents visit the shrine to revere the goddess and seek her assistance. The site is now marked by a stately A-framed wooden building that is simple in design and made with natural materials. Because nature is cyclical, the shrine must also be renewed and refreshed. Since the year 690 CE, Ise Jingu has been rebuilt every 20 years with a special ceremony in which meals are shared with the kami, infusing the everyday act of eating with ritual significance. So, as sort of evidenced by the various works that are included in this chapter, many people develop their own approaches to spirituality, be it within an organized religion or independently. For some people, artworks serve as an effective channel not only for expressing those beliefs, but for exploring them as well. The possible methods of expression and exploration are endless, but include abstraction, visionary constructions, focus on personal journeys, and the search for one's inner light. German artist Wolfgang Leeb is influenced by many religious traditions, including Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, and Christianity. However, his works are not connected to any single religion in particular. Among his inspirations is the first chapter of the Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu, which reads, "Something mysteriously formed, born before heaven and earth, in the silence and the void, standing alone and unchanging, ever present and in motion. Perhaps it is the mother of 10,000 things. I do not know its name. Call it Tao. For lack of a better word, I call it great." Along with the Taoist ideas of mystery and creation, Leib also considers both the simplicity and complexity of nature to be vital. After completing medical school, Leib determined that he could contribute more to the benefit of humankind by becoming an artist than he could as a doctor or a monk. His solitary processes take an inordinate amount of time. Pollen from hazelnut, this artwork in this image, was made using 5 jars of pollen, each taking a month to collect and representing multiple growing seasons. He spends all this time in the hopes of inspiring a meditative contemplation and an embodied experience for viewers that mimics the passage of time within the natural world, as if the viewers were also spending an entire summer sitting and collecting pollen within the dandelion field right alongside the artist.